storms. We had tornado warnings this week. All right. People will be trickling in as they come in. It's good to see everyone today. Thanks for joining. This is kind of the week 2 of the continuation from our StrengthsFinder class. And last week, I'm still working on the video. I had some sound problems, but I'm going to try to upload it from last week. But this week, I wanted to pick up a little bit where we left off last week. And with this idea of as an individual, how do we craft and set vision for ourselves? And in fact, I want to give you a process that I'm basically using now with clients that I've had used with me because I have a coach, and kind of walking through when it comes to coaching someone through something, how do we step into it? And so there's going to be 3 distinct beats that you're going to see today. And just to kind of give you a heads up and kind of a framework of this, I'm going to go back over and give you more examples in detail of this idea of setting vision and so vision gap reality. So I'm going to step back into that, not quite do it at Mach speed. Then I'm going to talk about why that process then fails for us. Like, what are the challenges of that? And how do we address that and think about that? And then I'm going to come back to, and how do you then tactically operationalize this vision that you have? And so, which would basically be the process that I try to do with clients when we start. So when a client starts with me on a call, that's what we do. We talk about this thing we're trying to set, and then the challenges that get in our way, and then what's the first steps. And then that's when the coaching relationship for me would begin, is that after that. And so everything we're going to do right now is kind of almost what I would do in a first call, or like so my website's being revised, and you'll see buttons everywhere that say book a free vision call. That is exactly what we're going to be talking about. And so I've asked Danny to tag team some in with me because he obviously does coaching there too. And we'll bring strengths into this as we start to talk about the operationalizing of it. But I'm going to try to kind of just cover some beats quickly in the kind of the framework of here. And I'm going to give you examples from my own life. But for those of you who are interested, if you're willing and you pick something off last week, our 5 areas of purpose, relational, financial, physical, community, that you're like, here's an area that I think I'd like to work out a vision for. Because what I would do normally is kind of get a client to figure out of their 5, what are 3 areas, and we would do this process with. If you want to ask questions about some of that, I'd love to be able to talk through that with you real time. So that's kind of where we're going. Danny's going to tag team in and out. Sound good? Good to see you, Danny. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
As we kind of go in, I'm going to share this iPad again. So last week, we basically started with, we kind of covered the 5 areas, right? We covered these 5 spaces of, there we go, there's the screens. We covered these 5 areas of Gallup's well-being as a source for vision. So how do we come up, kind of ask questions about where we want to go in life? And people always struggle with this idea of what does vision look like and all these other ideas. So the thought of giving those 4 areas is to almost inspire you to say, what part of my life matters? And so, but when you do pick an area, for me, so this process, when it works for me, is that I kind of worked through all my well-being pieces when I set goals for 2020, and I had picked a couple different areas. I actually ended up picking, I guess, so it was purpose in some ways. So that was one of the categories I picked. And I remember I picked a specific revenue target for 2020 that I wanted. That was that as a measure of my business and how well it did. I also picked a financial target for my own personal life for 2020. And that was that was going to be a debt conversation. Like, I have debt, company debt that I wanted to get rid of. And so I had a debt target for 2020 and physical. And so when I started, so I did this process in September, October. In physical, I was like, I kind of wanted to be able to, there's a couple different things, and I'll talk about what they were. And so these ended up being, when I started with I had a new coach at the time, and he's a friend, but I coached with him for 6 months. And I have a coach now, but he's like, okay, what are the targets we're working on? Where are we going? What's the goal? And so our process was a lot like what I want to talk to you again. I'm going to hit the beats again. Please ask questions in different pieces. The first one is vision. So, for example, on the financial one, my coach, John, said to me, Mike, what's your vision that you're talking about for 2020? And I said to him, I said, well, I think I want to pay off debt. So my vision was pay off debt. Great. Okay, that's cool. Pay off debt. My coach, who is analytical, by the way, John is analytical maximizer, if that should tell you anything about a coach. So analytical, he's a lot like Todd. He's very specific in details, doesn't believe things that aren't real. He's like, great. How much debt do you want to pay off? 20%, 30%, 10 bucks, 20 bucks? And I was like, I said, well, I'd love to be debt free. Really? Okay. He's like, and then I came back and said, well, maybe not debt free this year, maybe debt free by next year. And so he said, and this is interesting, he was like, how much debt do you want to pay off? And I was like, 50% of it. Great. Now, most of us right then will start the conversation and say, okay, now how do I pay down debt? And we come up with all these reasons. But here's the deal. This is my vision for 2020 for my financials. There it is. But his next question was, well, wait a minute, Mike, 50% of what? Your vision completely depends upon your reality. And so then he said, how much debt do you have? And I went, oh, I probably got, and I spit out a number. And he's like, okay, so exactly 50% of that is this much money. And here's how, and I was like, well, he's like, and that'll be 50%, right? And I said, well, sort of, maybe it's a little bit more, and maybe it's a little bit more. And we just laughed because what ends up happening is, by the way, if you don't know this, there's research that says people would rather talk to you about their health, their sex life, than they would rather talk to you about money. They will describe to a stranger the intimate details of their life, but they won't talk about money. They have a money issue. And so what ends up happening is we don't tell the truth. And so he's like, Mike, how can you set a vision if you don't know what the actual reality is right now? And I was like, that's true. And so most of us think that if we just set a goal, it's going to be enough. But we don't often look at reality. And so the challenge is because between the vision and the reality is, and this is back where I was talking to you guys as we kind of ended last week, is there's a gap, right? All this is the gap. So when I talked about on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? Most of us, if most of us will pick a number high enough that we feel good about progress, but low enough that we could take steps without the steps being too big. We minimize how bad this is. And so what we often do when we set a vision and reality is I did this to close the gap, because when John asked how much debt I wanted to pay, I suddenly felt bad. So you know what I did? I started to, at first he was like, how much do you want to pay off? And I was like, debt free, but I hadn't told him how much debt I had. So the first thing I said was, I want to be debt free. And then I went, yeah, maybe I just want to be lower in debt. So I started lowering my vision so the gap would be smaller. Well, then after I did lower my vision, he was like, okay, wait, what is 50% then? Well, initially I inflated my reality. It's not that much. It's no big deal. It's okay. To close the gap so I wouldn't feel bad. Finally, John, in classic John fashion, which I've now learned, he would have none of it. He was like, you can't have a vision if you don't have reality. If you were otherwise you're just dreaming. The difference between a vision and a dream is a vision is based in reality. Like, where are you? I had a client when I was doing this process with them in January, and they're like, I want to be intentional with my wife, meaning to like encourage, offer coffee, like whatever. I want to be intentional with my wife, once a day during the week. I'm like, okay, that's 20 times a month. I said, how much? And he's like, And so then I'm like, January's coming. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, I said, well, how many are you going to go for this week? And he's like, well, I said once a day. And I said, wait a minute. How many times are you being intentional right now? He's like, once a week. And I'm like, so you're going to go from once a week to 5 times a week on your first step. That's crazy, because you have to know where's the actual reality. You can set a vision for physical and not know how much you weigh, what your blood pressure is, things like that. And so most people will struggle with vision, but when their big challenge is ultimately the gap. And so vision, reality, gap. Any comments in there, Danny?
Yeah, Mike, I was just going to ask, and I kind of threw it to the group, for you all, what do you feel like is the most difficult aspect of setting your vision? Because I think some of us, like for me, I'm like aspirational, I'm futuristic, I've got all these dreams. And so I don't ever get to the granular, I don't get to the details. My wife's the opposite of me, right? Like she's got discipline and, and consistency. And for me, I'm like, well, one day I'll just do X, Y, and Z, And so I think for me, like my themes and the way I'm wired, my vision becomes inflated. To Mike's point, it becomes more of a dream. Others of us maybe get too stuck in the granular. So we're like even afraid to even start because it's so minuscule, or maybe our dream isn't big enough or our vision isn't big enough. It's only one step of the way. So I'm curious for you all, like what makes setting that vision, even to Mike's story, like as a case study, what makes it difficult for you to set your vision? Is it either extremes or something else that I might be missing? And so I see Katie says, knowing I likely won't follow through, or the gap is too great. Yeah, absolutely. Danny says, determining what I want. I feel like I want to do something for 3 weeks and it changes. It's hard to commit. Guilty. Activator. It's hard to commit to a vision because I'm afraid it's going to change. Absolutely. Yeah. Anyone else want to share or text it in? Great.
Because as you guys jump in there, like even like talking to Katie's comment, when I wrote my first book, I've talked about this a lot publicly. My first book, I wouldn't tell people I was writing a book because to say it out loud was to create a vision. And I was like, what if I never finish it? So I can't possibly say I'm writing because I have to live in that gap. And so in a perfect world, we would set a vision, okay? And then we would set a vision, we'd base it off our reality, and then we would close the gap. Now, the way to close this gap is going to basically be to fill it, right? The way to close the gap is to step into it one step at a time and kind of build steps and kind of pull the two together over time, okay? And so most people will then think, so right, you get a vision, let's say for physical fitness, and then you look at your reality, you're like, yep, I'm out of shape, I can't do whatever. And so, so for me, just so you know, to make this one my fitness one, my goal was, my vision had to be very specific. It was not enough to say, he's like, what is your goal? And I said, I want to be in the best shape of my life in 2020. He's like, okay, what would be a measure of that? Because when it comes to making a plan for your life, every vision is very specific. It has a yes or no element to it. Everything can be measured in some way if you choose to make it a measure. And so for me, he's like, what is a sign, Mike, that you would be in the best shape of your life? Because I said I couldn't run around. I'm like, well, I'd be thinner. And he's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to run around a picture, all your fat pictures for comparison? Like, how will people know that you're in the best shape of your life? It's got to be this thing where you know. And so I said, you know what? The best shape of my life would mean a half marathon, biking a century, and biking the California Coast Classic again, all within 12 months. Why? Because those are things that either I could do or not do, but to do all three in a 12-month window would be signs that I would be clearly in the best shape of my life. So I had very specific signs, much like the how much debt I will have paid off X. See, this is why reality is important, because the vision has to be specific, but that means it's specific in relationship to reality. So go for specificity, because this is where the devil lives, is in the vagueness. So that's the gap. So we don't like the gap. So why? So let's imagine that. So I'm going to be in the best shape of my life, half marathon, Century, California Coast Classic, all within a 12-month window. What if I just ran out the door the next day and tried to run a half marathon? It doesn't work, right? But I could. That would close the gap. Yes, I just did it. I would die, but I closed the gap. Well, I didn't really close the gap. So why don't we? So the challenge of the gap is this. How we relate to this gap is the reason we do or do not accomplish the steps to realize our vision. This gap makes us feel things. So so think about it for yourself. How does the gap make you feel? How does it make you feel? Because that ends up being the issue. Most people set vision or reality, and when it comes to the gap, they're concerned, they don't like how it feels, and so they stop setting vision, they stop working towards things. This gap, typically, this gap produces shame. We feel bad. We don't feel good about not getting there. We feel bad about what if I didn't step into it enough. We feel bad about what will they say about me when I don't do it. They've heard me say it before. Relate there. And so all these other elements. So for you, what are you guys hearing? I mean, when you think about gaps, when you think about vision, what is it you guys think of comes to mind when it's like, okay, these gaps between my vision and reality, what are things you guys feel typically?
Katie, I'd love for you to share, if you wouldn't mind, a little bit what you said. You're being vulnerable with us. So any thoughts on that? I mean, you're with gap and, not believing in yourself. Like, I mean, I think that's something we resonate with. What are your thoughts, or any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think some of it too is just it's my first comment. My personality isn't great at the setting the steps, committing to something, but I think also some of it is thinking, well, someone else already does this so much better than I do. What exactly is my niche? What exactly is my place? I think there's some of that for sure. And some of it I probably don't think I unpack enough, to be honest. Yeah.
Is it a worthy vision? Is it a worthy goal? To somebody else, is it worth putting your effort into?
Mike, there's a couple comments on, Jessica and Danny said, like, changing so much, not being able to, like, almost like decide what the vision is because there's so many visions, or I'm afraid if I choose one, I'm saying no to a million others. So any thoughts on that in terms of like how the gap and where the gap fits in with having a vision maybe that's too broad or too many?
Yeah, because I was going to say there's different levels of vision. And so what I'm talking about here at this level is almost more of a 12-month vision. This is a process you go through on a 12-month window. Now, with some clients, we're having a much larger conversation. Where do you want to be in 5 years? And then I would break it into this. I'd be like, okay, so for me, like my whole focus is, for me in 5 years from right now, I want to be speaking less, coaching less, and focusing more on helping create small businesses that create jobs in fragile economies. That's my long-term goal. That's the last half of my life. But between here and there is financial independence, lack of debt. There is clarification of my own vision. And so there's sub goals that are 12-month windows that roll. My ultimate goal, though, is by 50 to be able to pivot again, mostly into international public policy with regards to employment in fragile places.
Right.
And so that's my shift. And so I think from that, understand, you're not picking forever, you're picking for now.
Yeah.
You need a vision for now that you can then pivot every so many months if you need to.
Right. I think that a helpful way of thinking about it, and Mike, that was really helpful, because it's I think we have to think kind of bifocally, if that makes sense. Yes. Sometimes we have to toggle to the long-term view, but that can become exhausting. It might be tiring because we can't really see it fully. Yeah. It's still murky. And then it has to get to the near side of short-term vision. And in the short terms, every 12 months have to align with the long term. And as those 12 months become 24, 48, you can then start seeing the long term, saying, okay, how are these pieces adding to that? So I think it's a both and, but I think you're right, Mike. Like starting with what you're talking about is the vision that's like here, for the 12 months, which still seems a long time. Danny, you made that comment, it feels a long time, but it really isn't, like if you think, we're halfway through the year and it feels like, granted we're in a different situation, but like, things move quickly, more quick than we think. I've done a master's program. I'm finishing up a PhD program. I did my master's in 5. I'm doing my PhD in 3, and it's gone like this. Like, I know people are like, wow, it takes forever. And it's like, dude, I don't even remember the time. It just has gone. But my focus, to Mike's point, is like, I've been able to kind of toggle it back to saying, what's my 2-month goal? What's my 3-month goal? What's my 6-month goal? And let me just stay steady with that, because then I look back in hindsight's 2020. I'm like, that was nothing in the grand scheme of my career.
And I think, and so we're going to land there today. That's where we're going to go, is that this final piece of what the shorter term goals look like and how do you step into them? And so what does that actually look like? But this reality of the gap, though, and how it feels is that what I found is, and this has been a real eye-opener for me in the last year, is that the reason I don't then try to operationalize my reality, because I just said, and I'm paying someone, I'm saying, I want this. I'm paying a coach hundreds of dollars an hour. And so I said, I want this. Then why don't I do it? How many times have you signed up for a gym that you're paying money for that you don't go to? How much do you ever sign up for a class that you take and then do nothing with? Your mouth is saying you want something, but then your behavior doesn't match it. This is the big issue. This is the gap, right? And we do this vision gap reality thing, by the way, every single day. You go to bed and say, I'm going to get up and run in the morning. That's the vision. But in the reality, you feel so tired, you sleep in. That's the reality. See the gap? But you said what you wanted was your vision. How often have you worked for or worked with people who say they want something, but the reality and the vision, they never work to close it? They're always there's a gap there. We're doing this every single day. So why then? Why is there a gap? How I relate to this gap, what I've discovered is a guy named Edward Schein, who was he was a professor at Pepperdine and UCLA and a bunch of other places. He's a pretty brilliant dude. I'm gathering from a couple different pieces of languages. What I've discovered is that there's oftentimes things that I want more than the vision that I say, and they only show up in the gaps. I want to be in the best shape of my life, but I don't work out as much. I will sacrifice and eat things I shouldn't. Why do I do that? Why does the thing I say I want not match the thing I do? Because there's something you want more. There's a private little addiction thing that goes on inside of us. And what we realize is, and so I'm just going to give you as a framework, that there are 4 addictions. Actually, let me do this way. I'll call them addiction's a negative word. So 4 needs. How about that? 4 needs that we secretly need more than our vision. And they get in the way. So when given the choice between doing the hard work of our vision and getting these needs met, we pick the needs. So I want to list out 4 of them. 2 are usually a problem. The other 2, not so much. Okay. So the first one is feeling good. Okay. If you have this need, if that's one of yours, which is one of mine, I have a need to feel good or to not feel pain. I don't like to be inconvenienced. If I've worked hard, I'm like, oh, I've earned the ability to have this piece of chocolate cake right now. That's right. Because the resistance would be the feeling bad. Feeling good is one of my needs. And so when pushed, and between my vision that might cause me pain to get after in that moment, and feeling good while I'm in the Sky Club late at night after working all day, and I promised my trainer I'd eat on plan, but there's free alcohol, food in the Sky Club, and back in the days when I could fly, I would go, well, I don't want to feel bad right now. I've earned the right to not feel pain. And again, feeling good is one of our needs. Looking good. Second good. I don't want to look bad. And there's nuance to this. I don't really care. I'm pretty brave and courageous and I'll be vulnerable, but I don't want to look bad to people that I care about. A client, a friend, a relationship. For me, strangers, public, I'll be really vulnerable. I'll say things. Some of you have heard me. I'm very open on stage and things. But when it comes to something that might make me look bad, I don't want to say it. Third one, being right. You have a secret need to be right. You don't know who you are if you're not. You have to be the answer person. And so therefore you can't be wrong, which might drive you really hard sometimes to be able to go ahead and do like the hard work to do good research. But then there's times where you fight for your answer, even though there's a good chance you could be wrong at something. So feeling good, looking good, being right. And then the last one, being in control. Being in control. Okay. And so when it comes to being in control, it's a thought of, I can't be a person who doesn't have control. What if something happens beyond me? What if something that is not in my control? I'm a person who knows what to do and knows how to be in control. So if you're brave enough, what are your poisons? My poison, just so you know, is I'm primarily focused in on looking good. Secondarily, my secret need is feeling good. Okay? Those are my two. Those are the ones that bump for me. And you can see it kind of in my positivity theme a little bit and my communication theme. Like my themes actually kind of show a little bit in like which of these needs. And these are the secret drivers that trump the visions we have in our life because we secretly need them more than the thing we think we want. What are some of the thoughts out there?
When you say feeling good, does that encompass like being like my need, my vice, like I love just being entertained. So I'll just sit in a chair that's not even comfortable and scroll through Instagram for way too long and then go to Twitter and then I'll go play video games for 2 hours. And then I did nothing. Is that encompassed?
Yeah, because that's good? A dopamine hit thing.
Right.
And so they call it the beta patterns of Netflix and different dopamines of it. And so it's, I'm not feeling inconvenience. I'm not feeling boredom. I'm feeling good. And so, anything. And so that can be the feeling. Yep.
Cool. Yeah. Then that one.
Okay. Feeling good. Somebody else. Feel free to unmute. There's only 8 of us on here. 5, 10 of us. Any other brave souls?
I'm talking about being right, because I think when you have your vision and you're establishing your gap, it's like you can logically explain everything and be like, yeah, this is going to work out. This is going to be great. Like I'll give you all of the reasons why this is an amazing idea, and I'll lay out the blueprint of everything that I'm going to do, and this is going to be amazing. And then that fear of like, but what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
Then
or Matthew, Matthew, what themes do you see kind of popping up for you? StrengthsFinder themes.
Like what themes do you think that is that drive you to that grab hold of the being right? Any ideas?
Well, I do have context. So
yeah,
in terms of blueprints, I think I'll analyze all of the other blueprints and then be like, all right, I got the blueprint. This one's gonna work. And then it's like, oh man, what if I was supposed to learn from these mistakes and now I'm repeating them?
It's great. How about you, Jessica?
Yeah, so I think that I am better thinking than articulating myself. But
no rush.
My thing is like, I want to cast this grand vision, which is more than 12 months. That was helpful.
Yeah.
But I'm connectedness, so I need to see how it all works together. And I'm responsible, so I'm committing to myself, right? Like I want to do it. And so I think something that I've been like trying to lean into as I'm in this undefined area is more releasing my need to just commit, right? Like I can commit for a while and then pivot.
Yes.
And it's uncomfortable, but it's good. And knowing that I can define my role and then it can shift based on feedback and based on experience doing whatever I'm doing, so that my commitments don't need to be like for my entire life. Like they can shift and evolve. And so that's helped me to start moving forward on some some like bigger ideas or dreams.
Yeah.
But then also I know that I may let those go when something else comes my way, and that is different, but it feels good. So I think it's that connectedness responsibility piece that.
Because those will come out, and those will come out with like the being right, being in control. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. With responsibility, the lens is always put a limit on the thing. I'm committing to here, and then I'm committing to reevaluating. I'm committing to this limit, and then I'm committing to reevaluating. And so your commitment is in being responsive, not just in going, yeah, I'm committing, and because then you feel stuck. It allows you to navigate more efficiently. So in some ways, but so what I like to think about though, for all of us, is when it comes to feeling good, looking good, being right, being in control, what happens when you're feeling that thing, when you're feeling the opposite, when you're feeling like you're looking bad, when you're feeling it, think about things you want, the visions in our life, and then think about the reality. Because here's something that came out for me that my coach now hammers me. And if you actually could see the Instagram messaging that goes on, as he slides into my DMs, whenever I post things, he'll be like, there it is again. And we're friends now. He hasn't coached me in like 4 months. So for me, my feeling good, looking good, I discovered shows up in procrastination. Like I delay. Because if I haven't started, I don't look bad. So it was an act of me pushing myself with a coach to even announce that I was going to do a free StrengthsFinder course. Do you know how often I have said in the last 2 years, I should really offer a free course? So finally I threw up, and in fact, I threw up this in another course that I was going to do on Wednesday nights. And I was like, wait a minute, that's way too much commitment. But I had to just do it because you know what I would normally do? I would delay. You know why? Because I didn't have a cool slide to announce a free StrengthsFinder course on Instagram. Because you guys wouldn't come if the slide wasn't cool. So I wouldn't send out the slide. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I mean, the number of things I've told Danny over the years I'm going to do, but then I don't. To a point where, this is the craziest example. When I came back as part of my goals, I was saying, I want to be in the best shape of my life. Well, I needed to get into different classes and courses. I also needed to meet people. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to commit as a short-term goal to joining fitness classes at my local gym. This is in January. And I was like, you know what? When I lived in Coronado, I would go to yoga. I'm going to join a yoga class. Cool. I could do that. But you know what? I kept delaying and delaying, but I bought a yoga mat. Finally, I registered for this yoga course and I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And I couldn't figure out why I was still delaying. And then the night before the yoga class, it was going to be 6 a.m. I got in bed and realized that my yoga mat was still in the plastic. And in all the movies I'd seen on TV, when people go to yoga classes, they just roll out their mat. And so I'm like, wait a minute. What if my yoga mat isn't going to roll out well? What if I don't have it rolled the right way? I got out of my bed at midnight to unroll my yoga mat, to practice rolling it so that in the morning, I would look like I knew what I was doing with a yoga mat. You guys, I had just climbed to Everest National Park and done base camp in 3 passes. Like, I shouldn't care. But legitimately in my head, I was actually rolling a yoga mat at midnight on my floor for fear of looking bad in front of a bunch of people who wouldn't see me in a dark room anyway. It's a stupid little metaphor, but I realized I delay, I get afraid. And so between taking a risk and going, I need to get a new client, I'm going to go ask them for the referral. I'll go, what if I'll look bad? So what I started to realize was that when I look at my vision gap reality, is that it's not just about this one vision. It is a symptom of things that you do constantly. And so John finally said to me, Mike, where else do you think feeling good, looking good causes you to delay? How many things do you delay in your life because you're worried about feeling good or looking good? What is the product in your life when your need to not feel bad, to be right, to be in control overwhelms the thing you say you want? How does it show up? Because once you see it once, you'll start to see, I do it in relationships. I do it with my health. I do it with my money. I do it with my friends. Like 5 areas of well-being, you'll start to realize that these are my core triggers. These are my core needs that I didn't even know were driving me. And I wonder why I delay. I wonder why I troll. I wonder why I won't speak up, or I do speak up too much. And so think about this. So to make it real, for me, procrastination and avoidance is how my need to feel good and look good show up. What are some of the real practical things that you think show up in your life based on these 4 needs? Anybody brave enough to share?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And I pose a question to the group too. I ask kind of like, how do our needs cause us to delay from taking steps towards our vision? Yeah. Because I can see how all those, but I'm curious from the group, what kind of resonates with you, or what causes you to stop or pause or, delay, even though we know that vision is what we want once we've defined it, but what keeps us from getting there, and how do these needs fit within that?
You can feel free to unmute. So I can see when you unmute, so I can call you. Yeah, Danny.
Call of Duty just dropped a new video game. It's like super fun to play.
Call of Duty just dropped a new video game.
Dude, what's it called, man? I gotta look it up.
No, you don't. You don't do it,
Danny. Yeah. And so for you, Danny, it might be like I pick a distraction. And so it's the ability to step into find a distraction.
100%. Yeah, it's 1,000%. It's memes on the internet. It's movies. It's a video game. And then here's where it gets really toxic: is I convince myself that playing it isn't like I don't think playing video games is bad, but to an excess it is, because for me it's like a way that I communicate with my friends. Like my best friend is married, and so I don't get to see him a whole ton, especially now that we're in quarantine. And so I tell myself, oh, this is a way that I hang out with my friends, which is all well and true and good. But when it's like tens of hours a week, it's like, well, all right.
I wouldn't hang out with my friend in person this much. Wait a minute.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Marcia?
So, it's funny. I was going through and I go, yeah, I'm feeling good. Positivity, of course, right?
Yeah.
Looking good. I'm a workout fanatic, totally. And I was debating about being right and being in control. And what I was thinking about control, but I really realized it's probably right, because I want to put out content, and I'm afraid I don't know enough information. Like I'm going to be wrong in what I'm putting out, and somebody's going to say, this is stupid, or this is not right. And every time I put something out, I constantly get great feedback. But there's this gremlin in me, input, that doesn't think I know enough. So
that's exactly right. And so there's people that could be helped, but what happens is this unseen driver says, oh, well, you can't possibly have what that person needs, potentially. And so it holds, when it's like, wow, I mean, Marcia, like you could just put it out there because it's okay. It doesn't, one, you probably are right, but two, you can have an impact that you don't even realize in some ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I think, because that's the other piece of this. And this is where we don't have to dive into this piece, but just so you know, I'm going to step back into that steps piece. But this is where, when I do group coaching and I do individual coaching, you then have to unpack and say, what is the core lie you believe? Because this, just so you know, these needs are based on a lie about yourself. Something that you're afraid is true that isn't true. Well, people won't accept me if I don't look good. Or people won't trust me if I'm not right, if I'm not intentional. Or the world is unsafe if I'm not perfect. The world is there's something. So for me, I've done the work, which it's worth a conversation deeper at another time, is that I've now realized that yes, there's feeling good, looking good, but that is driven by a fear of abandonment. If anybody knows Enneagram, I'm an 8. We're scared to death to be abandoned. This is where your Enneagram meets your Strengths Finder, meets your vision gap reality, is that you will see that your fears, the fears of your Enneagram space, if that's something you're into, you'll find a direct line between the Enneagram fear and two of these 4 things, which then trump any vision you have. Because at the end of the day, any gap has got to be filled by something, and we typically fill it with fear. And so we do all this work to make plans, but then we don't realize why just making the plan is enough, because the gap is still there. It's invisible. It's hungry. It's starving. And so you can set vision all day long, but unless you deal with that gap and you deal with the fears and then you deal with the lie, all that. This is why when people are like, well, StrengthsFinder coaching is great. I'm like, yeah, but all day long, no amount of knowing your themes is going to overcome the lies you believe about yourself if you don't deconstruct the lie. Does that make sense? Not to get a little heavy on a Thursday morning.
That's great. It's great. I was going to say, Marcia, to your point, I kind of wrote this down as you were talking. I put, our deepest fears keep us from doing our greatest good. And I think that resonates, because it's like, we could be doing so much good to the world, whether that's providing content or, care for somebody else, but our own fears, we get in our own ways of being able to provide that, because we're like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not going to be in control. So it's super helpful.
Yeah. And so in the midst of that, so if we can start to unpack the lie, here's the thing. The way to undo the lie is to change it one bite at a time, one step at a time. And so to Katie's point earlier, when it's like, what if I don't get there? What are the different pieces? What I'm finding is that there's a really great book out there by, I think it's James Clear, called Atomic Habits. In the book Atomic Habits, he means atomic not in a great force, but meaning from an atom perspective, like the smallest perspective. That typically, one of the challenges we face is that if we do find the courage to go, one, the work of a coach, by the way, is to really help people keep going, wait a minute, I chose my need over my vision. And so we get used to going, like every week we're checking in. You said you were going to do X, did you not do it? Well, here's the thing. For me to check myself on whether I chose my vision day to day or whether I chose my gap, the way to check that is to constantly give yourself things that you have to step into. One step at a time, one chunk at a time. So when I have a much larger vision, I want to have my own company, let's say in 5 years, that's somebody's vision. I then break it into 12 month, 30, I do 12, so 12 month, yeah, double tap Apple Pen, come on. You can do 12 month, 30 day, and 7 day, or 7 to 10 day gaps. So we set an annual gap, we set a 30-day goal, and we set a 10-day sprint. Like, what are you doing in that 10 days? And what we'll do is, on the 3 key areas, break it into the most incremental, the smallest piece that you can. Like, because that's how you reclaim and deconstruct the lie, is the smallest step at a time. Like the smallest possible piece. And so for me, step 1 for me on my financial one I told you guys from the beginning was, Mike, count your debt. And he was like, Mike, what do you think the most key thing you could do would be if our goal is to pay off 50% of your debt by December, what is the most key thing? And I was like, well, I probably should look at all the things I'm overspending on. He's like, Mike, do you know how much debt you have? Step 1, truly, of moving towards a goal is getting completely real. And I said, okay, I'm going to find all my debt. He's like, all right, can you do it? When do you want to do it by? So time is the other factor of this small little transaction. Don't overbite. You take it and you break it into the smallest possible chunk. And then when you're done, you move on. There's a woman named, I think it was Twyla Tharp. I might get this wrong. Twyla Tharp was a famous dancer, ballerina. Like her whole life. She's world famous, especially in New York. And she was known for, even into her 70s, working out for 2 hours every morning at her studio. 2 hours every day. And everybody said, how do you maintain the discipline of that? And she's like, I do not have a workout discipline. She's like, I have a hail the taxi discipline. It's like, what? She said, if I can hail a taxi outside my apartment in the morning, I will get to my studio and work out. But I can't think of it as going to work out. What does it take, she said, for me to get from my apartment to the taxi stand? That's it. Because once I'm there, I'll go. Right? We take the big steps and go, people say, well, how do I find a job or whatever? And I'm like, can I ask you a question? Have you talked to your spouse enough to decide, I am looking for a new job? Yes or no? That's your homework for the week. Have you given yourself permission? Like, you break it into the bites that seem so small. Most of us are jumping way too far ahead. Can I decide that I want to create a vision? Can I decide not to? And to take Danny's story and spin it someplace else, like the first step for me wasn't to go, first to get in shape, wasn't going, I'm going to start running and adding all these things to my life. I actually started with things I was going to remove. I was like, so I thought, well, I'm going to remove things from my life. I'm going to remove bad things as a starting step, remove step. But then I realized that was too far ahead. I had to learn to track things to get to reality. I can promise you, whatever first step you think you need to take in order to start to rethink this gap and start to reclaim the story of this lie you believe of it only works if I look good, starts one tiny, I heard somebody say it's a marble. It's like a bag of marbles. One marble by itself doesn't do much. Put a marble in and then another. And so what I spend my time doing with clients is going, okay, did you put the marble in this week? And then if you didn't put the marble in, if I didn't track, if I didn't take the steps I said I would take, I then always go back, okay, what was the need that I prioritized? What is the need I'm believing in that moment? I've had clients who are like, yeah, their fitness is part of their thing. And they'll come back and be like, yeah, I know I said it was Thanksgiving weekend. I know I said I'd run or at least go for a walk every day, do something intentional for 45 days. But the reality is my mother-in-law is in town and just got too busy and crazy. Okay, he said he wanted to be intentional exercise every day, but the mother-in-law was an excuse. Why? Could he have not said to his mother-in-law, I know you want quality time, I made this commitment? No, but likely because it was like he didn't want to look bad in front of his mother-in-law. But he could have, because something bad would have happened. There's a lie he believes about himself. He could have said, you know what, Mom, I love you. I want time with you. I have this thing I've committed to more. For me, I will fail to tell a client the meeting is ending in 10 minutes for fear of looking bad to them. I could have started the meeting though with, I only have until 10:50 and then I stop. But I won't do that because I'm afraid of looking bad. It's all about what I want in the moment. Do I want my need or do I really want my vision? And so these little moments are constant checks that are helping me learn to prioritize myself over my need. And they don't have to be big, they're small. Does that make sense? And so I would then ask, if you have something, if you picked an area of your life, here's your vision, and you break it down, be specific. Yet what's the metric? How will I know a year from now that thing occurs? Well, if I was going to do that, how would I break that into 12 months? Well, how would I break that into 30 days? And then from there I go, what are the 1 to 3 most simple actions that would move me forward? A simple action. And every 30 days, just so you know, I recalibrate. Next. And you may find that, okay, I thought by month 6 I'd be here. It's okay. I don't need you. The act of you doing this, it's not about hitting the 12-month goal. The act of you doing this every week starts to change how you behave and redirects. You are likely to hit your goal, but even if you don't, you're significantly further along. And so it's the matter of going the big into the small chunks. So I do a vision into the small pieces, and then this, and then with every step, it's did I do it, yes or no? And that's the next week, is I want to talk about, I'll pull up a little integrity, is the yes or no question. What does it tell me about what I really prioritize. Am I prioritizing my lie, or am I prioritizing my vision? And I keep calibrating. And we kind of do this, the smallest possible step.
Mike, I'm going to ask a question that Todd asked, actually. Kind of a step back. He asked the question kind of, are the needs inherently wrong? Are we implying that the need, I mean, obviously we change it from addiction to needs, but can you speak a little bit about that? Because I don't think you're not saying looking good is bad in and of itself, but can you say a little bit more about that?
No, and so here's the thing. No, looking the need by itself, it's not bad to like. I can enjoy, I like not looking bad. That's great. But here's the thing: is that this is where do I like to look good more than I want something different in my life? Is that it's not a problem, but it could be a problem because it's okay to, like, there's times I will say to my coach many times, yeah, I'm not committed to that thing this week. Yeah, no, I can't. In fact, I can't commit to being alcohol free during COVID. I was like, yep, I will commit to exercising every day. I'm not committing to not having whiskey. I won't do that. That's not my thing. Like, because I'm like, oh, but now my season's ending. I'm like, oh, I'll shift. And so I have to be, the trick is the needs are about being aware of what you want. It's not about judgment. But when we say, oh, I want this vision so bad, and then we don't, this is a process for people who say they want something and then wonder why they don't get it. We think it's just because we failed to plan, when the reality is we actually want something more. And so to the question, Todd, it's like at times, what do you want more? And so ultimately in those moments, and so I have parents who'll say, do I want to be right or do I want to feel love? Do I want to feel, and I heard a great quote the other day, someone said, I'd rather be right than be consistent. It's like, people are like, why you change your mind? Because I'd rather be right than be consistent, which is great. And so knowing what you want, and so there's nothing wrong with these needs, but be aware your vision is miscalibrated if you set a vision, but you constantly trump to a need. You don't really want the vision. How do you then create a vision that matches a need if that's what you want? But be aware, there's times when your needs, especially if they're built on lies, they can be toxic.
Yeah, Todd, do you want to add any follow-up question to that?
No, that's good. Yeah, I think what I hear you saying is it's the excess of, for example, wanting to be in control,
Totally.
And using it in the wrong context or in a part of your life where it doesn't need to be. That's along the line of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, because Todd, what I'm saying is like at that moment, because there's likely things that you're going to want that's going to mean like, man, to grab hold of that, I got to let go of this. And there's going to be a moment of feeling out of control. And you're like, okay, but it's for something better. Like to go, oh, I just should not be in control. That's garbage. Know that there's moments where you want something more than you want to be right in that moment.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah.
Just the deconstruction that way.
Yeah, and his question kind of also too tagged on like vocationally. He's a pilot. Doesn't mean not to be in control. I think it's a little different. Like we got to be in control of things that are like life threatening. Yeah.
Yeah, Todd, please be in control.
Yeah, but when it comes to building my business, I have to take risk. I have to say, okay, I can't control whether this Amazon sales tax is going to hit me or not, and I have to accept that. So it's applying it to the context that is appropriate.
Yeah, because I think these needs they're like they serve us, they help us in certain ways in the right moments. The trick is knowing when the need overrides something else we say we want, because we can say we want that and they're like, but why do I keep defaulting back to the old way? It's because we're not in touch with the fact that we keep choosing something else. So we choose safety over risk. We choose comfort, like Danny said, we choose comfort. And so that also then, if I can leave you with one thought, is how do you tell yourself the truth? Because Danny's right. I will say, well, while meeting my need of feeling good, I'll be like, well, I'm in business, so it's a good idea to look good. It's a good idea to look good. It's okay to delay till it's right. Why do it carelessly? But that's a lie, right? They call it a racket. In the old days, during the days of no alcohol, the store up front would be a nice little drugstore, but the liquor store would be secretly in the back because the liquor store was more valuable. They could sell liquor in the back, bar in the back, but the drugstore was the shiny, happy face. And so as we talk about integrity next week, this is that other thing, is that the language we use to tell ourselves, oh, here's what I justify and think I want, when in reality, I'm secretly trying to get a need met. Does that sound good?
Good.
So be thinking this week, vision, gap, reality. Are there times like, and so again, mine is delay. My feeling good drives me to delay. Where do I delay in my life? What do your needs drive you to that might end up getting in the way of the things you want? Yeah. Any thoughts? As we kind of
I just asked the question, kind of what was helpful. If in the last couple minutes, if anyone has a thought, you could text it in.
Love to check in.
Danny, I like that 12, 30, 10 goal setting rhythm. That's nice. Yep. Asking how the gap makes us feel. Unpacking the lies that live in the gap. Yep. Super helpful.
Sweet. So next week, we'll kind of tie these together. How to go, okay, wait, I have to unframe these and kind of go a different direction. So, sound good? Thanks, everybody.
Have a good week.
Mike and Danny. Thanks.
Thank you. So good.
See you.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Absolutely. Ask away, Marcia.
Happy birthday.
Is there a book on this? I mean, because I know that the pieces on the well-being